The first deer changes you. Every hunter who has taken one remembers it. Not the way you remember other memories, not the soft, imprecise recollection of something that happened years ago, but with the specific, crystalline detail of an experience that permanently rearranged something in you. The cold, the light, the exact angle of the shot, and the way the deer moved when it was hit, and the walk through the woods to find it afterward. The moment you kneel beside it and put your hand on its flank and feel the warmth leaving the body and understand, really understand, in the way that no amount of preparation or conversation could have made you understand before that moment, what you have done and what it costs and what it means. Every experienced hunter tries to prepare a young hunter for this. They tell you to take the shot carefully, to make sure, to be patient, to honor the animal with your attention in the moment before the shot and your care in the moment after. They tell you it will feel different from anything you have done before. They tell you it is good, that the difference you feel is the weight of a real thing, and that weight is what hunting actually is, and the hunters who do not feel it are the ones you should worry about. They do not tell you about a deer that has been hit clean and has not died right. Not because it doesn't happen, it does, and every experienced hunter has dealt with it, and there are protocols for it. But those protocols are for a deer that has been hit and is moving away and needs to be found and finished. They are not for what Mae Sutherland found in the thicket. They are not for a deer that has arranged itself, that is facing you, that is still alive, that is waiting. This is first deer. Virginia, blood and bone. Some shots are clean, some landings are not. Mae Sutherland was 16 years old and had been preparing for this season for 4 years. Not in the way that preparation was sometimes used as a word for casual interest, the kind of preparation that meant you had read about something and watched some videos and borrowed equipment. Mae's preparation was the kind that came from a father who took hunting seriously and who believed that serious meant slow. She had spent her first year in the field with no rifle at all, just walking beside her father and learning to move through the Patrick County timber without disturbing it. The second year, she had carried an unloaded rifle and practiced the mechanics of a shot, the breath control, the trigger discipline, the muscle memory of a natural point of aim, hundreds of times in the field without ever firing a round at an animal. The third year, she had taken her hunter education certification and her first shots at range and 2 practice squirrel sessions to understand what it meant when a firearm made the thing it was aimed at stop being alive. The fourth year, her father had said, "This season, you shoot." He had spent the summer and fall reviewing with her everything she knew, stand placement and wind direction and reading deer sign and shot selection, the angles, the distances, the specific positioning that made a shot ethical and the conditions that did not. He had told her about the first deer in the way that fathers told their children important things, not once, but across many conversations, each one adding a layer of understanding to what had been said before. He had told her, "It will feel different from anything you have done. The weight of it is real. You should feel it. The hunters who don't feel it are the ones to worry about. The difference you feel is the price of the shot, and the price is right, and you pay it honestly, and you move forward." He had told her, "A clean shot is everything. You owe the animal a clean shot. Everything else in hunting, the preparation, the patience, the hours and the cold, everything is in service of the moment when you make that shot well." Mae had listened to all of it. She had taken it seriously. She was ready. She had not been ready for what she found. Nobody could have been. Her father had given her the choice of stand locations for opening day, and she had picked the ground blind on the south-facing hillside above Tanner Branch, a natural bowl in the terrain that funneled deer movement along a contour trail between the bedding cover above and the creek bottom below. She had scouted it twice in October with her father. The sign was good, the approach was easy. The shooting distance to the most likely crossing was 40 yards, well within her comfortable range. She was in the blind by 5:15 on a rainy Saturday morning in early November. The rain was light and steady, not a hunting rain, her father would have said, just a wet that keeps the leaves soft and the shot sound covered. She had her father's 2.43 Winchester, a rifle she had been shooting for 2 years and trusted completely, and her rain gear and her patience and everything her father had given her. She waited. The rain came down and the light came up slowly through the overcast, and the timber was dark and wet, and she sat in the blind and watched the crossing and was still. At 7:42, the doe came down the contour trail. She was a mature deer, not a large doe, but not a small one, a 3- or 4-year-old by the body condition and the way she moved. She came down the trail at the careful head-up pace of a deer that had been alive long enough to know the difference between timber that was occupied and timber that was not, that tested the air with each step. Mae had done everything right in the approach. The wind was in her face, she had been still for 2.5 hours. The blind smelled of wet leaves and nothing else. The doe came to the crossing. She was broadside, 40 yards. Everything her father had described as the conditions for a good shot was present. Mae breathed out. She squeezed the trigger. The shot was clean. She knew it was clean before the rifle settled from recoil, the solid, complete feeling of a shot that had found exactly what it was aimed at. She had felt it at the range on inanimate targets and had been told that a live target felt the same, and it did, in the mechanics of the shot. But the deer's response told her what the target could not. The kick forward, the hard flinch, the specific movement of an animal whose cardiovascular system had received a fatal disruption. The doe ran. She ran hard and fast into the thicket 30 yards north of the crossing, crashing through the brush with the noise of a large animal moving at speed through dense cover. Then the timber was quiet. Mae sat in the blind with her rifle, and she waited the 20 minutes her father had told her to wait, the time that let a hit deer go down and stay down rather than being pushed by immediate pressure. And she listened to the rain and the timber and felt the weight her father had described beginning to settle into her. It was real, it was heavy, it was right. She waited her 20 minutes and she went to find her deer. The blood trail started at the crossing, bright and plentiful, the kind of volume that confirmed what the shot had felt like. She followed it north into the thicket, reading the drops on the wet leaves, working methodically the way she had been taught. The thicket was dense, young cedar and greenbrier and the skeletal remains of last year's canes, the kind of cover that deer used for bedding because the density made approach difficult. She pushed through it carefully, following the blood, and found the doe at the far edge of the thicket, perhaps 20 yards in. She stopped. She stood very still. She looked at what she had found. The deer was lying in a small open space at the edge of the thicket where the cedar thinned. It was facing her, not perpendicular to her approach, not at the angle that a running deer would have fallen, but oriented directly toward the direction she had come from, facing the crossing, facing the blind, facing her. Its legs were folded beneath it in a position that was not the collapse of a running animal, not the sprawl of a dead deer, not the awkward geometry of a body that had fallen in motion. It was tucked. That was the word her mind reached for and kept returning to. Tucked, the way a deer tucked its legs when it bedded down deliberately, the way a deer arranged itself when it chose to lie still. The wound from the shot was visible, right where she had aimed. The shot she had felt was clean in every technical sense, the entry point exactly where the heart-lung triangle was, the angle correct, the caliber sufficient for a deer of this size. The deer was still alive, not dying in the gradual, ebbing way that a mortally wounded animal died, the labored breathing, the fading response, the diminishing light in the eyes. Not that. Alive, present, aware, looking at her. Mae had been told about a deer's eyes in its final moments. Her father had described the vacancy that came into them, the way the light went out of an animal's gaze as consciousness faded, the transition from presence to absence that was one of the most recognizable and most sobering things a hunter witnessed in the field. The doe's eyes were not vacant. They were full. The fullness was wrong. Not the fullness of a living deer's alertness, that quality of active, nervous presence that every hunter recognized. Something different, something that the eyes contained rather than expressed, as if the capacity for presence in those eyes was not the deer's own, but had been filled by something else, the way a vessel was filled, and whatever was in them was looking at Mae through the deer's eyes, the way you looked through a window. She had been standing at the edge of the thicket for perhaps 30 seconds. The deer had not moved. She had not moved. They were looking at each other, and neither of them was moving, and the rain came down through the cedar, and the wet November morning was very quiet, and the weight of what she had done, the specific, real, earned weight her father had described, was present, but accompanied now by something else, something that did not have the word weight attached to it, and for which she did not yet have any word at all. She took one step forward. The deer's head turned slightly, tracking her. Not the flinch of an animal startled by movement, a deliberate, controlled tracking, the way you turned your head to follow something you were watching. She stopped. The deer was looking directly at her, through whatever was looking through the deer, at Mae Sutherland, 16 years old, standing alone in the rain in a thicket in Patrick County, Virginia, with her first deer. "I see you," she said. She had not planned to say it. It came out of her the way words came out when you had thought something clearly, and the thought needed to be spoken. The deer's ears moved. One ear, the left one, rotating slightly toward her voice. It was still alive. It had been shot through the heart. It was still alive, and it was looking at her, and it had arranged itself in the thicket to face her, and it was waiting for her to come closer. Mae raised her rifle. She took the second shot from 8 yards. She was close enough that the sound of the shot in the cedar was enormous, and the rain in the aftermath was conspicuous by comparison. The deer did not move when the shot was fired. Not the flinch, not the recoil of impact. It absorbed the shot the way a target absorbed it, receiving it, registering it, not responding. Then, very slowly, the fullness left the eyes. That was the only way she could describe it. The fullness drained out of them the way liquid drained from a container, gradually, completely, until what remained was the vacant, glass-still gaze of a dead animal. The deer's body did not fall. It stayed tucked in its arranged position, as if whatever had been holding it in that posture had released it all at once, and the posture had simply become permanent, the final arrangement of a body that had been held in place by something other than muscle and bone. Mae stood over it with her rifle, and she looked at it for a long time. Then she knelt beside it. She put her hand on its flank. The warmth was leaving rapidly, faster than she expected, as if the warmth had been borrowed and was being returned now that whatever had borrowed it was gone. She said what her father had taught her to say over her first deer. This animal fed well and lived clean and gave itself to the family. I take it with respect and gratitude, and I will use it well. She said it quietly, to the deer and to the rain, and to whatever had been looking at her through the deer's eyes and was not looking at her anymore. Then she field-dressed the deer in the rain, the way her father had shown her, and she got it out of the thicket and down to the truck by herself, which took 2 hours and was the hardest physical work she had done in her life. She did not call her father until she was at the truck. Her father had driven out from his own stand when he heard her shot at 7:42, a single shot, followed 35 minutes later by a second. He arrived at the trailhead as she was loading the deer. He looked at her face first, the way parents looked at a child's face when they were trying to read what had happened. "You all right?" he said. "Yes," she said. The shot was clean. He looked at the deer. He put his hand on it the way he always did, the brief acknowledgement, the thing she had watched him do her whole life. "Good shot," he said, "right where it needed to be." "There was a second shot," she said. He looked at her. It was still alive, after the first shot. It was in the thicket, but it had arranged itself, facing the blind. She paused. "It was looking at me. Not the way a dying deer looks. Something else was looking at me through it." Her father was very still. "I took the second shot," she said. "It went then." He looked at the deer for a moment. Then he looked at her. "You did right," he said, "on all of it. The first shot was correct. The second shot was correct. What you said over the deer was correct." "What was it?" she said. He looked at the Patrick County ridgeline above the trailhead, the wet timber in the November gray, the cedar thickets, the creek bottom below. "I don't know," he said. "Something that uses deer the way a hermit crab uses a shell. Something that doesn't die the way it should because it isn't what it looks like. Has it happened to you?" He was quiet for a moment. "Once," he said. 20 years ago on this same ridge." He looked at her. "I should have told you it was possible. I thought it was rare enough that it wouldn't happen. I was wrong not to tell you." "Why didn't you?" He looked at the deer. "Because I didn't want to put it in your head before your first deer," he said. "Because a first deer is supposed to be exactly what I told you it would be, clean and honest and earned." He paused. "Most of the time it is." "It was still earned," Mae said. He looked at her. "The shot was right. The second shot was right. I did what needed doing. That's what you taught me." He put his hand on her shoulder. "Yes," he said, "you did." They drove home with her first deer in the truck bed and the rain coming down and the Patrick County ridgeline going past in the wet gray, and neither of them spoke much. There was a lot to say. There was time to say it. She had her whole life to hunt this ridge. She was going to. Mae Sutherland is 19 now. She has been hunting the Patrick County ridgeline for 3 seasons since that first one. She has taken 5 deer in those 3 seasons, all clean shots, all recovered quickly, all properly. She has not found anything wrong in the thicket again. She told me when I spoke with her, "It hasn't happened again, and I don't expect it will. I think what happened on my first deer was a specific thing, something that used a specific deer in a specific moment. I don't know why that deer or why that moment. My father thinks it was because it was my first deer and something knew that. Something that knew what a first deer means in this tradition and decided to make that moment its opportunity." "Opportunity for what?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "To be looked at by someone who would really look," she said. "My father had seen it 20 years ago, and he knew what it was. I didn't know. I just looked at it. I looked at it the way he taught me to look at everything I was responsible for, really looked, without flinching, took it in completely." She paused. "I think whatever was in that deer wanted to be seen by someone who would really look, and it chose the moment of my first deer because that was the moment I was going to really look no matter what." "Does that frighten you?" I asked. "It did then," she said. "Now it's part of what I know about that ridge. There is something on it that uses deer sometimes. I watch for it when I'm in the field, the signs that a deer is not entirely what it looks like, the specific quality of wrongness that I know now because I've seen it once. Most deer are just deer. Most deer on this ridge are just deer." "But not all," I said. "But not always," she said. "And when it's not, you know." "How?" She looked at me. "The eyes," she said. "A deer's eyes are specific. You learn them when you've been in the field long enough. The vacancy, the alertness, the different ways they look at you in different conditions. You learn what a deer's eye actually is." She paused. "And when it's not a deer's eye anymore, when something else is looking at you through it, you know the way you know when someone is home in a house, the same quality, you know." She said it with the flat, certain authority of someone who had earned a piece of knowledge at a specific cost and carried it from that day forward. "I'll teach it to whoever I take on their first deer," she said. "What my father didn't tell me. I'll tell them most of the time it is exactly what you expect, clean and honest and earned. But sometimes the deer is not entirely the deer. And if it is not, if you look at it and something looks back that has no right to be there, you do what needs doing. You take the second shot, you say the words, and you go home." She said it the way her father said the important things, simply, completely, without drama. The way of a hunter who had been through something and had brought the knowledge of it home and intended to pass it on. A rainy Saturday in November. Patrick County, Virginia. A 16-year-old hunter with 4 years of preparation and a clean shot, and 20 minutes of patient waiting, and something in the thicket that was not what it appeared to be. Mae Sutherland looked at it directly. She looked at it the way her father had taught her to look at everything she was responsible for. She saw what was behind the deer's eyes. She took the second shot. She said the words. She field-dressed her deer in the rain for 2 hours, alone. She drove home. She went back the next season. That is what the hunting tradition is. That is what it has always been. Not just the clean shots and the crisp mornings and the fellowship of a campfire after a good day. Also the things you find in the thicket that no one warned you about. Also the second shot. Also the words said in the rain over something that has no right to still be alive. Also going home and going back. Most deer are just deer. But sometimes the deer is not entirely the deer. And if you hunt these mountains long enough, if you really pay attention the way the good hunters pay attention, you will learn the difference. Watch the eyes. Always watch the eyes. You'll know. If first deer reached somewhere deep in you tonight, if you have taken a first deer or helped a young hunter through one and you felt what that moment costs, leave me a comment below. Tell me about the first deer. Tell me what it felt like. Tell me about the weight your father described and whether it was what you expected. I want those stories. I read every comment, every one. Subscribe and hit the bell. Good hunting. Take clean shots. Say the words over what you take. And when you find what you shot, look at it carefully before you walk up. Look at the eyes. Most of the time they'll be exactly what they should be, but not always. And when they're not, you'll know. Do what needs doing. Come home.